Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the pretty dark psychology behind historic punishments and trying to understand exactly why crowds used to treat them like halftime entertainment. You know, if you think modern justice systems can be harsh, imagine living in a time where sheer brutality wasn't just common, it was literally the entire point. We're going to look beyond the gore to uncover the fascinating, albeit terrifying, societal belief systems that allowed these public punishments to not only exist, but to completely thrive.
The core of our analysis really boils down to this one idea. Civilizations didn't just punish, they performed. We're going to explore how these incredibly brutal acts weren't just chaotic bursts of violence born out of sudden anger. No, they were legally written, officially approved, and highly calculated performances carried out in front of massive, cheering crowds. Society didn't just casually accept this cruelty, they demanded it as a demonstration of order and authority. To map this all out, we'll be looking at 5 key areas today. The theater of brutality, crimes against the cosmos, fear as state control, engineered to erase, and finally, the apex of cruelty.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the theater of brutality, and how violence became completely normalized. Let's start by looking at just how casually physical destruction was woven into the fabric of daily life. Imagine you're in Renaissance Europe. You steal a pair of shoes. Just shoes, right? Well, for that petty theft, you could literally be boiled, flayed, or crushed in the town square as a very public demonstration of what the phrase, "don't steal," really meant. And the wildest part? Nobody thought it was extreme. It was just Tuesday. But what happened when they merely suspected you of a crime, and you took a little too long to confess? Well, that's when they brought out the methodical torture devices.
Take the infamous iron boot, for example. Your leg gets shoved into this heavy metal casing, and then thick wedges are literally hammered into the gaps. Every single strike is meant to squeeze and shatter bone into absolute pulp, and they'd sometimes even toss in red-hot coals just for extra measure. The iron boot was specifically designed to turn a human leg into a decorative attachment until a confession popped out. It perfectly illustrates how the law prioritized extracting that confession over basic human anatomy. Society truly believed that extreme pain was a perfectly valid legal tool to uncover the truth. Moving right along to Section 2, Crimes Against the Cosmos and Restoring Order.
This is where punishment moves from just getting a confession to literally restoring the balance of the universe. Here's where things get cosmic. Killing a parent, parricide, was viewed as an ultimate betrayal of the universe itself. In 17th century France, they treated this practically like slapping God in the face with a baguette. In ancient Rome, it was seen as the ultimate symbol of chaos and corruption. Because the crime was so deeply unnatural, society believed the punishment had to reflect that exact same unnatural chaos. And man, these different empires had uniquely horrifying responses for restoring their cosmic order. In Rome, this cosmic chaos was met with something called puna culae, or the punishment of the sack. You'd be sewn into a leather bag along with a dog, a snake, a monkey, and a rooster. Animals the Romans actually thought symbolized corruption. Then, the whole bag gets tossed into a river. So you didn't just drown, you drowned while being frantically mauled by terrified animals in the pitch black. The societal belief driving this was actually pretty straightforward. If you turned against your own blood, you simply didn't deserve to die among men. You had to be removed from human society entirely. Meanwhile, over in 17th century France, they used the breaking wheel to address this cosmic offense. You'd be tied to a massive wooden wheel, limbs splayed out like a starfish, while executioners methodically shattered your bones with heavy iron clubs. And they weren't trying to kill you quickly, not at all. They were actively trying to keep you alive just long enough to fold you like human origami between the spokes, leaving you on display for the birds and the sun. The belief here was that a crime against the natural order required a highly visible, lingering physical dismantling. Okay, on to Section 3, Fear as State Control, and how empires manufactured authority.
What's really fascinating here is how empires explicitly manufactured fear to maintain absolute power. When a state sees rebellion not just as a crime, but as a literal threat to its existence, punishment becomes a political broadcast. For instance, if you committed high treason in 10th century China under the Tang Dynasty, you earned Ling Qi, or a death by 1,000 cuts. This wasn't just an execution. It was a highly calculated medical procedure designed to prolong suffering for the crowd's viewing pleasure. A government-appointed executioner would carefully remove muscle and skin in measured stages, intentionally dodging major arteries. They always saved the face for the very end, so the crowd watched a living person suffer, not just a corpse. It was the state actively broadcasting its ultimate control over the physical body.
The Ottomans took a similar route to control their military. Desertion? That was the ultimate betrayal of the state. To enforce absolute, unquestioning loyalty, they would slowly lower deserters onto greased wooden stakes. The executioner specifically aimed to avoid major organs to keep the victim alive in agony, letting gravity do the work inch by inch. According to historical accounts, some poor souls endured this for over 24 hours. The state's message was unmistakable. Defying the military machine leads to a slow, meticulously engineered end.
And over in 1500s England, betraying the crown had a very specific, wildly theatrical consequence. First, you were dragged through the streets by a horse, then hanged just to the brink of death, just until your eyes bulged out. After that, your literal guts became the main entertainment, as they were pulled out and burned right in front of you. Finally, your chopped-up limbs were nailed to city gates like grotesque road signs. The belief system operating here was entirely focused on deterrence. The state literally deconstructed the traitor and distributed the pieces to remind every single citizen exactly where disloyalty leads.
Next up, Section 4, Engineered to Erase. We're talking total societal erasure.
So let's move to a completely different kind of horror. One where the goal wasn't a loud public spectacle, but total, silent erasure. Sometimes, the state didn't want to make an example of you, they just wanted you to cease to exist. This brings us to a brilliantly dark concept, the oubliette. It actually comes from the French word oublier, which means to forget. Medieval castles contain these tiny, pitch-black vertical shafts that just ended in cesspits. Prisoners weren't meant to be rehabilitated or even officially executed. They were just dropped in, the trapdoor slammed shut, and they simply starved or went completely mad, standing ankle-deep in filth. Society's belief here? That some people were so problematic they didn't even deserve the dignity of an execution. They only deserved to be forgotten forever. Similarly focused on total elimination, but with a lot more immediate, undeniable violence, early Islamic Persia used vertical sawing. Criminals were tied entirely upside down. Why? To keep blood forcefully pooling in the brain, utilizing gravity to ensure the victim remained completely conscious as a two-man saw cut downward from the groin right through the pelvis. The spinal cord usually wasn't hit until about halfway through, meaning every single nerve stayed online. It was just a brutal, horrifyingly methodical way to literally split a person from existence.
Which brings us to our final section, number 5, the apex of cruelty and dark human creativity.
Let's see how all of this builds into the ultimate fusion of engineering, nature, and deep societal apathy. This is where human creativity reaches its absolute darkest potential. Behold the brazen bull of ancient Greece. It was part execution device, part torture chamber, designed by a guy named Pirolaus. A hollow bronze statue of a bull was heated from below, effectively cooking the locked-in victim alive. But what really reveals the deeply disturbing societal mindset is the engineering. Clever acoustic tubes built into the head turn the victim's desperate screams into the roaring noises of a bull. Why would they do that? So the crowd could enjoy the spectacle without feeling the pesky burden of human empathy. They literally engineered a way to be unspeakably cruel while keeping their own consciences completely clean.
Over in Southeast Asia, they took a totally different approach. They basically weaponized nature itself. An immobilized victim was laid out over young, sharpened bamboo sprouts. Now, bamboo grows incredibly fast and strong, literally strong enough to crack concrete. Over a few days, these plants would slowly skewer the victim, growing upward through muscles and organs. Hour after agonizing hour, the human body became a garden bed for a natural spear trap, executing a person without an executioner ever having to raise a single sword.
But the absolute apex of cruelty, that has to be scathism from the Persian Empire. The victim was locked tightly between two hollowed-out boats, with only their head and limbs exposed. They were force-fed massive, sickening quantities of milk and honey until they developed severe diarrhea, and then their exposed skin was coated in that exact same sweet mixture as bait. Left floating out in a stagnant swamp, this vile ritual turned living, breathing flesh into a literal breeding ground for insects, maggots, and rot. And honestly, the most terrifying part of scaphism is just the number 17. One man is historically recorded to have survived this suffocating, hallucinatory nightmare for 17 agonizing days. He was purposely kept alive by guards who returned every single day to force more milk and honey down his throat and reapply the sugary bait. It was a systematic, state-sponsored suspension of death, maximizing physical decay while forcefully maintaining the victim's heartbeat.
Humans are just profoundly creative, aren't we? But as we wrap up this explainer on these legally approved nightmares, it really forces us to reflect. We've seen how historic punishments were direct reflections of exactly what those societies valued, whether it was maintaining cosmic order, projecting absolute state authority, or the theatrical erasure of an individual. So I want to leave you with this provocative question. What do our own modern methods of punishment reveal about the deeply held belief systems operating in our society right now? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, and I'll catch you next time.